Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Jason Feehily. I'm Head of Trusted Research at the University of Nottingham. A fairly new appointment since April of last year, and my origin story is did a lot of work in Asia at our overseas campus for the University of Nottingham. So what I wanted to look at this morning, addressing the trusted research areas, the challenge for Nottingham as a particular institution, how we have responded, and just some of the approaches that we've adopted, particularly in relation to our overseas campus. We have campus in China and Malaysia, but also the role of trusted research outside of STEM subjects and some of the learnings that we've picked up from that. And then some key takeaways, very much like, as Chris stated, what we've learned from our journey and whether that is transferable and relevant to other organizations. But just this is what we went through as we went through the process. So just picked out, who we are, a big-ish university, over 7,000 staff, spread over 3 countries, and particularly with the research grant income of around 130 odd million over 21-22. And why I put that figure up there is to say, what is my main KPI and challenge as the head of trusted research? And actually, it's for me to enhance, increase, and deepen international collaboration whilst remaining compliant with the trusted research frameworks and requirements as laid out by the government and the sector. So we are very much, although we're in a compliance team, our objective is to increase what we do internationally whilst doing it safely. And I echo what Chris said, the duty of care, both to the individual researcher or student, but also to the institution and the institutional requirements. So what have we done? We've adopted a slightly different approach. We centralized our trusted research within our research operations function. And we brought it together so that there is one team that looks at, for research, knowledge exchange, and teaching partnerships, our due diligence, our export and import control liabilities, our financial requirements, NS&I, and things such as the Nagoya protocols. And we've taken that as for all new international collaborations, we would expect the PI to complete what is at the heart of what we do, the project notification form, the PNF. And essentially the PNF, it's a self-designed form, not particularly complicated. It does branch based upon the answers as received, whether we need more detail or less detail. But in essence, what we're saying is, what is the project, with whom, and why are they working with you? Where are the partners based? So we know exactly who we're collaborating with, in which sector, and is there any money being transferred either from us to the partner or to the partner to us? And then each day, my team, we meet and we review the PNFs. And it's the meeting you can't miss. That's the one where we all come together and review these projects. And then we again will triage those that if from that meeting, we see low risk based upon the subject area or where the partners that are involved, we will sign off. We can escalate to an interview with the PI to get some more information and to seek clarification. And then we can then escalate normally to the faculty as the first port of call, but then we have a university escalation procedure, which our Deputy Vice Chancellor chairs, where the particular issues or challenging circumstances. And that is the heart of our approach. And that low, medium, high risk, and like everybody else who's wrestling with this issue, we have adopted our own process. We've got a commercial tool that we've brought in. We've inherited the financial due diligence checks that already existed within the university, and developed our own due diligence approach, looking at over 20 sources of open source intelligence to build a picture of the partner and who we're collaborating with. And as I say, that happens every day, and to develop, to speed up, to enhance the process where possible. As I say, a new team recently formed. We looked at over 700 PNFs last year, each one with at least one international partner, but I think my highest is 56 we've been working with. We're on track actually for over 3,000 this year. And our approach that we've adopted, very similar to Chris, in relation to trusted research training more generally across the university, embedded in our researcher academy, for example, bespoke export control training to areas in high risk, particularly the STEM areas within the university, and a developmental and collaboration process with our overseas campus so that they understand the requirements of trusted research in the inter-university collaborations. And I try to articulate how we position ourselves as a compliance ecosystem within our university, and some of the key mutual dependencies that we've developed over the time that we've been formed. Contracts, absolutely vital, because they're our safety net, that nothing gets through and won't be authorized without a trusted research check. Our ethics team actually help form our trusted research function and really help us on a day-to-day basis. The increasing importance of cybersecurity and trusted research and that synergy and our collaborations. The equivalent activity that's happening on our overseas campus. Our overseas campus don't actually use trusted research as a title, but refer to it as research risk, but a complementary activity. Also engaging with institution-wide due diligence, for example. So our philanthropic activity, there's a lot of synergies from the trusted research approach to the activity they do. And as was touched upon in Chris's presentation and with the questions, engaging very fruitfully with RCAT and being an open and honest partner in that collaboration, and demonstrating what we do and seeking their guidance in relation to our activities. And as I say, we've had a very positive relationship. Laura Branch is our RCAT representative in our region. But also, due to the structure of the University of Nottingham, we have to coordinate this activity with the parallel work at our overseas campus and addressing perhaps some of the particular challenges. So trusted research for our staff traveling to our overseas campus who may go on a partial secondment, and managing the requirements of those systems, and any cross-campus research and knowledge exchange initiatives, and ensuring the trusted research compliance within those. And then linking together, because obviously our campuses are compliant with regulations such as export control, and in China, the PIPL, their GDPR, making sure that we have a synergistic approach to ensuring that the role of trusted research within those collaborations. But also what we have found is that trusted research plays a really big part, particularly in the due diligence side of things, beyond STEM subjects. And we've got a number of issues where in our due diligence, we've unearthed things that the PIs were not aware of. One, for example, IPO data, there was stories around falsification of that IPO data by a potential partner, which we were able to share. The role of government officials in some procurement activities overseas, again, which the PI was not aware of. And certain institutions we've looked to collaborate with, and there's been huge issues within the host country around the leadership of those universities and potential issues that would reputationally affect the University of Nottingham collaborating. And I always say that although it's a sensitive area, echoing what Chris said, the power of a good due diligence can really inform our PIs as to whether actually they want to proceed with collaborations when information is disclosed to them, which they weren't aware of and didn't have access to if they hadn't worked with trusted research. So really just to look at some of the key takeaways from trusted research in our journey so far. And for me, trusted research is everybody's business, whether it be from the university executive board and setting the strategic direction. So we've had RCAT and as was CPNI presenting to our executive board around the role of trusted research, but also engaging, for example, with early career researchers and embedding that approach. And what we found very often is that trigger, although we then get a telephone call or a Teams call saying, I'd like to discuss something which is actually proves not to be a problem, it unearths a lot of things that actually we can help resolve which they hadn't actually considered. So we're able to reassure them that their approach is compliant, and as an individual, they are taking best efforts to comply with trusted research. Working with senior academics is really important in high-risk areas, particularly. Practice has changed. Export controls has been with us for a long time, but the synthesis of all of these areas under trusted research, getting close with them and supporting them in their activity. And then the role of professional service staff is absolutely key in kind of gluing that together, whether it be from the central teams to those within the faculty and schools. The trusted face is really important in relation to the compliance, both for the individual. We are talking about things which are sensitive. An individual may feel they might have made a mistake. And so we've just taken an approach to little things, but hopefully they increase that confidence. We have our own central email site, but our names are on it. These are the people you can contact if you want to have a conversation with them. Having skilled practitioners, I have a very skilled export control manager, which embeds confidence in all of the conversations that we have, particularly around export controls outside of Europe. Being responsive, understanding that these are sensitive conversations, and sometimes engaging in things which may not feel as if they're relevant to trusted research, but it's that engagement that spreads the word that this is important and can benefit both the individual if they get involved. And then complete transparency, particularly around escalation. There's no closed corners, no one talking, whispering away. I'm happy to share any of the escalation documents with the people who are involved in the project and any of the results that we find, because that is the way to keep their confidence. On a personal level, as a team, we volunteer for everything. Every single opportunity to get into a school, a faculty, into a research team meeting, into an ops meeting, and talk about it, whether it be for 5 minutes or for an hour to engage. And then, as I say, providing training on trusted research to our overseas campus colleagues, so they know that some of the questions they might get asked from UN UK colleagues, where that's coming from and what the purpose is of that. And then finally, sitting just below that is the monitoring, particularly around of our training activity that we undertake, both for academic and professional service, and understanding who is getting that training. Is it the most senior? Is it the more junior? And understanding a pattern for each of the schools, the groups, the faculties. And then sharing that with faculty leadership so they know how training is progressing. And then we can take action to target schools with a slightly different approach, who have a low uptake, who particularly may have a high level of trusted research risk. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions. I think you're on mute there, James.
Thank you. I need to work on my mouse clicks. Jason, that was fascinating. Thank you very much for your very informative talk. We've had a load of questions in the Q&A already, so I will start inflicting those on you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had a lot of questions, and this dates back to a couple that we couldn't deal with in Chris's session as well, about unfunded research and how is that dealt with, also in terms of not just the process, but in terms of, let's call them unfunded research collaborations, which aren't necessarily formal research projects. So how do those sorts of things fit into the framework that you put in Nottingham? Are there any special considerations? Is there a different route for dealing with them?
So we ask for, where unfunded or funded collaborations, we would ask for those PNFs to be completed. But that obviously is a challenge, because where is that line? When does a collaboration go from a discussion to a joint paper and those kind of things? But I think that we've seen that those can be a risk. So we request that the PNFs are completed. And so financial exchange is not a driver only for trusted research. It's the exchange of information, because obviously for things
really
like export controls, it doesn't have to be funded. However, we also in our training emphasize the potential risk of these collaborations. So we recognize that it's not a uniform approach of where the line is on a collaboration, but they are a risk. And the same process of who is the partner, why are they working with you, what are you exchanging or sharing, is still asked whether there is money involved or not.
Brilliant. This earlier question, I think, follows on from what you just said. How do you define international partnership? What kind of level of international engagement is required to trigger the need for a project notification form? Is there a defined threshold, or is it more variable?
So there is absolutely a research collaboration, a funded research collaboration, a funded KE, there is those. However, my slide on what defines an international collaboration is now 3 slides long. So an international expression of interest could be a collaboration. Co-supervision of a PhD outside of the UK could be an international collaboration. Secondment, participating in a visiting role, administering a joint lab outside, which is located outside of the UK. So there is a set line, but there's also an indeterminate area. But what we feel through training, and we're still on that journey, of course, but individuals understanding that the transfer of information or technology, ideas, data, that is the threshold very often. And we're more than happy to look at people's presentations, in EOI submissions. We've just done one recently where we reviewed all of the partners for the project. If in doubt, check with us is the approach that we take.
Thank you. We've had 2 questions about the team that you have working with you. Ian Lambert asks, how do you source and recruit skilled practitioners, particularly for export control? And an anonymous attendee asked, how many people are in your team and how did you make the case for investment in the team?
So I'll start at the end. The case for investment predates me. I was brought in actually partly because of experience in Asia, but also I have actually done export controls in a commercial role many years ago. I know the recruitment market is very challenging at the moment. We were very lucky that we actually had a contracts officer who'd worked commercially in export controls, and it was an internal move. And the core team will be a team of 4, but that's satellite areas where we draw upon a number of compliance officers and colleagues for our financial due diligence, for example, is actually part of another team, but within our wider directorate. So some of the function is distributed, but comes within the trusted research, my umbrella, as it were.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions about how did you get university-wide engagement in the process rather than this being seen as a kind of, putting up barriers, and another commentator notices that you've clearly laid a lot of groundwork to get the institution on board with the concept of trusted research. So getting that kind of institutional-wide support at multiple levels in the organization, is there, what's the solution? Is there an easy solution here? Is it kind of a long slog? I noticed you mentioned kind of being present in so many different university forums and arenas.
Yeah, I think, as I say, a lot of the work was actually does predate me as an individual. So part of that was engaging at all levels. So making sure that our UEB was fully briefed and fully supportive. Obviously, that then comes down into the faculty, but also there is a risk level both to the individual and the institution, and just being clear that you do need to be compliant to manage that risk, and part of that is it's a contact activity, trusted research. So you cannot, no engagement is ever wasted. Any team meeting, as long as you spread the word that there is a risk, but there's also a solution. And hopefully it's not burdensome to the individual as well. But it's a constant activity, and we're looking at different ways of doing training. We're just launching now a drop-in center type activity as well, where two of us will actually just sit in one of the main engineering buildings with the room and say, if you just want to come and talk to something, if you've got a concern, you don't have to schedule anything, just drop in.
Yeah.
And that we're trying that out as another way of engaging, as opposed to more formal type training.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A question that might be hard to answer, and do you think anything slips through the net, sort of, unfunded research, academics just collaborating with people they already know? I mean, I think a broader question, how much of a clear institutional picture can any institution have when there's so much activity that might not be reported or could fly under the radar?
It's a very difficult one. I think we're doing a lot of work on anything contracted, and we have a number of monthly checks on all awards to confirm and cross-reference that all of those went through, and it's just that engagement piece that it's in your interest to engage. If something went wrong and you've been through the trusted research process, you have the institution behind you. If you haven't, then you're not in that position.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Georgina asks, what's your approach beyond STEM research? Is that still using the PNF's approach, or is there another approach that you use?
Yeah, we use a standard approach just for clarity, and we've had fantastic from our Faculty of Arts and an engagement. We spoke with their senior leadership. A lot of our academics who work with NGOs, with small organizations, those kind of things. There's lots of issues around those, not issues, but they're very complex projects, and we've been very grateful that they've engaged so thoroughly, because trusted research has had that STEM focus because of the regulatory, the export controls, the Nagoya Protocol issues, for example. But I think my colleagues have recognized that we can help them in some of those, particularly around the due diligence and finding things out that they might not be aware of.
That's really interesting. Thank you. One final question, I think, before we call Chris back, mindful of time. Anonymous attendee says, you mentioned the various areas that link into trusted research. How do you ensure that cumulative risk is considered overall, rather than sort of each area of risk being considered and potentially signed off in isolation?
So where we're coming through is that we hold all the information of the product. That's where we'd like to get to. So we are able to join the connectivity with one organization. We've actually got 5 ongoing collaborations in different parts of the university, but we can then assess that risk and form a picture. It's not perfect, but it's holding that information centrally I think enables take a view, but then to escalate across the different functions, research, teaching partnerships, KE, etc., so that an escalation is thorough as to the risk. You know, with this partner, we have all these relationships. You know, should we then proceed?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Jason, thank you very much for
You're welcome.
fascinating
Thank you.
presentation and a really interesting Q&A session.